Daily Fantasy Sports, of course. If you're not there, you should be. I appreciate them sponsoring the show. I'm Dave Lochran. That right there, that fine fella is Adam Scherer. And we've got a 10-game baseball slate to discuss today. Coors Field is in play. Arizona Diamondbacks, Texas Rangers. Then you've got AT&T Park, where Kevin Pillar hit his first career grand slam yesterday. Who'd have thought that would happen, Adam?
Yeah, going to AT or going to whatever it's called now, Oracle. Always good for the home run output.
Is it no longer AT&T Park?
No, it's Oracle Park.
Huh.
You'd know that if you were better at DraftKings basketball.
That's
where the live final was.
Is that right?
Yeah. That's the only reason I know.
It's funny. On the site, it just says park. Like, seriously, the site I'm using for weather just says park. All right.
Yeah, no, it's Oracle now.
So the Oracle NBA Stadium, this is the last year. What's that going to be called?
I don't know what that's called.
Oh, okay. Well, we've got a lot. But first, we have to spend a few minutes here talking NBA. I'll be straight with you. It's a total circus at this stage of the game. An absolute circus. And if you're playing it, you're just going flat out stars and scrubs. Josh made a point that on some sites you might not even be able to fill your entire roster. I mean, look, with value, the entire Boston team, starting lineup at least, is going to be out. Tatum's out, Horford's out, Irving's out, Marcus Smart's out, Marcus Morris is out, Aaron Baines is out, and Gordon Hayward is out. Okay. So that's like 7 key players or key role players that are sidelined. Oh, God. For Memphis, no Joakim Noah. He's done for the year. Mike Conley's out. Avery Bradley. The list goes on. We can talk about the Lakers. Adam, I would take up too much time listing all of the players that are out. Steve Kerr said that he's going to rest 8 players over the course of their last 2 games. Andrew Bogut, Iguodala are out today. I think Thompson and everyone else is active, so there's that. We know what's up with Chicago. Everyone's out, so Jakar Sampson is now above $6,000. Everybody's out for Phoenix. Ayton, Holmes, Warren's still out. Booker done for the year. Oh, God.
Toronto's not resting anyone. That helps.
That's crazy to me, by the way, that they would not rest anyone. There's no potential for movement with where they stand. They can't take first. They're not going to fall to third. Why? But here's my thing. I don't think they play their regular minutes.
Right. I would agree with that.
And that's kind of the thinking I have for a couple of these teams. Like, does Toronto play their full allotment of minutes? Probably not. Luka Doncic is expected to play. What are his minutes going to look like? That's still in question. Even though the Warriors are playing, how many minutes are they going to play? I have this concern for pretty much everyone. And even with Boston, with everybody out, do guys like Rozier and Jaylen Brown play limited minutes? And the back of the bench guys get most of the work. It is totally insane.
Right. I mean, totally guessing, but I think that I would be most inclined to go towards guys. So like guys on teams like Boston that are they're guys that are actually, on the team, not like whoever the guy is that they just added to the roster like 10 minutes ago. But so guys like Robert Williams that we know are actual members of the team, but also not really important rotation pieces. I would lean towards those guys. I would lean toward guys like Towns that are playing for individual things. And if we have any teams that actually still are trying to lock up seeding, then obviously those guys. But amongst the teams that aren't playing for anything, I would be most inclined to trust the guys, the Robert Williams type guys, and the guys like Towns and maybe Luka that are trying to lock up individual awards or all NBA.
Right. I mean, Joel Embiid is out today, and so is JJ Redick, Mike Scott as well. But It looks like Butler and Harrison Simmons are going to play. The Sixers locked up the 3rd seed with Boston's loss to Orlando. So there's another team where you're left wondering, well, how many minutes are the key starters going to play? So just a rundown here, because Adam and I are going to talk an hour of baseball starting in a couple of minutes. And of course, live before lock with Fast Eddie Fear. And I believe Josh Engelman will be on with him for NBA tonight. They're gonna carry the bulk of the weight here. Josh and I did have a strategy show for NBA earlier today, though. Feel free to check that out, and the MLB strategy show. Okay, Adam. So just to give us a better idea of who's actually expected to get minutes and who are the biggest risks, the Bucks aren't going anywhere. Neither are the Raptors, although they say they're not resting anybody. I know the Bucks aren't playing. The Sixers locked into the 3 seed. The Celtics could take 4 or 5. It kind of seems like Brad Stevens doesn't care. And then the Pacers are 5th or 4th. The Nets, Magic, Pistons, Hornets, and Heat. All of them vying for either positioning or a playoff spot. The Hornets and Heat are 9th and 10th in the East. The Hornets have a much better chance of making the playoffs. The Heat are like sub 1%, and that's probably because of their head-to-head standings against the Detroit Pistons, who also play today. So Pistons and Hornets, big implications there in the East.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. Good stuff. We got to talk about it, man. So
No, I mean, I don't have anything to add to the standings.
Well, I'm curious, talking about teams like the Hornets and teams like the Pistons, if these are teams that you're that you have interest in today, whether it be Kemba or Drummond in big games.
Yeah, I mean, those are the teams I would lean towards. Obviously, for Kemba, pace down spot against Cleveland. A bad Cleveland defense, though, should pretty much be able to have his way there. And with so many of these teams not having anything to play for, the top end of the salary spectrum certainly has some question marks. So I think Kemba stands out there. Drummond obviously has been playing really well for a while now, so no problems there either. Certainly most interested in getting to the teams though that do have some chance of making the playoffs and have a reason to still play.
Yeah, and then in the West, Warriors locked it up. Nuggets and Rockets 2 and 3. That could change, I think. Looks like yeah, I think so. Nuggets still have 2 games left, maybe not. Blazers, Jazz, Thunder, Spurs, Clippers. I mean, I still expect Westbrook to get his full allotment of minutes, and it looks like the Jazz aren't really going anywhere. So there's not a whole lot of movement to be had in the West tonight. I think the Thunder and Westbrook and Paul George will be the one team where you feel pretty confident that they're locked into 36 plus minutes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Do you have like a favorite not cheap play on the slate?
I mean, it's probably right now just going to be Westbrook because I have him projected to play a ton of minutes. I wouldn't. I obviously don't hate James Harden against OKC. I like him just as much. But if you're talking not punt, I really like Kemba. Huge game for Charlotte. I have him projected to play 37 minutes here. Drummond against that Memphis defense and that Memphis front court is brutal. Slow paced game, but at least he's going to get a ton of work. But yeah, Kemba one at 9K really stands out to me as a strong play. I don't know what Doncic's minutes are going to look like against Phoenix, but it's obviously a good spot. What about you?
Yeah, I think Kemba would be my favorite guy, like outside of that top tier. But there's so much value on the slate that it's more raw points than anything. So I agree with you that Westbrook and Harden, even if their teams aren't really playing for anything, the difference between getting them or getting Kemba in most lineups is just going to be whether or not you leave $2,000 or $3,000 on the table. So taking those raw points obviously is a good move.
All right. And then with value, this is where it just gets super ugly. You're looking at guys like Robert Williams, Jamario Cheerio Jones, Daniel Tice, PJ Dozier. Jijic is probably going to play 30 minutes against Charlotte. Yabusele, Semi Ojale, Rozier. I mean, it's Jahlil Okafor played a bunch of minutes last game. This is why I say it's a circus, because with all these cheap guys, you just care about the minutes more than anything else, but it's not as easy to predict them as you'd think. because we don't know what the coaches plan on doing with some of the starters. Some of these starters could play 22 minutes or they could play 35. You have no idea.
Right. There's definitely like there's safety in going to teams, or some safety at least, in going to teams like Boston where they have so many guys out. Same for the Lakers. But even there, I mean, I assume Robert Williams plays somewhere in the mid-20s in minutes, but he doesn't have to. I assume that Daniel Tice plays in that same range, but you could see one of them play more than the other. There's still risk, but obviously going toward teams that are missing more guys like Boston is the way to go.
All right. NBA Live Before Lock Show coming up from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Eddie Fear, Josh Engelman going to take you up to lock and provide you with a whole lot more information than we just did because we're flipping the page, talking baseball here. Let's kick it off, Adam. 10 games, and we'll start with Baltimore and Oakland. The Baltimore Orioles with a very solid showing yesterday. Marco Estrada inside homer-friendly parks usually unravels, and he did yesterday. Now they got a matchup that may look great, but it's not nearly as nice as Marco Estrada facing Brett Anderson. The ground baller doesn't give up a ton of home runs, 4.1 total for Baltimore. And on the other side of this, John Means, 5.5 implied total for Oakland. Adam, it is currently the second highest on the slate behind only Colorado at Coors Field. Let's talk about pitching here. If you don't like pitching, we can work right into the hitters.
Yeah, not much for me to say about pitching. John Means has been working out of the bullpen for Baltimore last season and so far this season. So I don't have any expectations of him going deep whatsoever into this game. Even in a post-game interview yesterday, Brandon Hyde, the Orioles manager, basically said that him and his coaching staff were going to have meetings after yesterday's game to basically try and figure out exactly how they're going to get their way through this game because they're operating under the assumption that Means isn't going very far into it. So it's a weird spot. I talked about it on the podcast with EMAC last night. It's weird because normally when you see a reliever act as an opener, it's someone that has the platoon advantage against the top, or at least the majority of the lineup. But that's not the case here for Means. Like, he's a lefty. In his limited time in the majors, he has done nothing to suggest that he can get righties out. And they're now starting him against an already Oakland A's team. So it's a spot that obviously has a ton of upside for Oakland. Big park shift, favorable park shift for them. Warm weather in Baltimore today. A not very good Baltimore bullpen behind Means. Like, they have a couple long relievers that have pretty good stuff, but they're still inconsistent. And nowadays relievers are so good that normally you don't get that. So one of the highest upside spots on the slate, no question. Chris Davis individually is one of my favorite bats, but getting to Marcus Semien, Matt Chapman, Stephen Piscotty, even Pinder and Kana and Laureano, like top to bottom, it's a just really good spot for Oakland.
Yeah, and as expected, Marcus Semien leading off against the lefty. Chapman, Piscotty, Davis, the whole lineup, as you mentioned, from top to bottom. Hell, even Laureano, I have zero problem with. Now, these guys aren't going to come particularly cheap either, but they shouldn't be expected to. They're pretty good hitters. It's pretty wild, though. Like, Ramon Laureano is $4,600. $4,600, Adam, on DraftKings. If you're stacking Oakland, there's a very good unless you are different than I am and you're going to like Matt Harvey, which I refuse to do and never will. You're gonna be hard pressed to play Jacob deGrom in a full Oakland stack.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, it was a Twitter conversation that was going on a lot today amongst several people, but it gives you the opportunity with how tight DraftKings pricing has been, and it's obviously totally different than FanDuel where everyone is free. But with how tight DraftKings pricing has been, it still creates edges in tournaments because like everyone knows Oakland's in a good spot here, but it'll drive their ownership down because it's really tough to get them with deGrom. But then also within the stack, guys like Laureano, guys like $4,400 Mark Canha, I don't think will carry the same kind of ownership that guys like Chapman and Davis do because it makes it really hard to full stack these guys. You're getting into hitters that frankly are not worth their price tag. And so you're going to get them at really low ownership, and it lets you stack one of the best teams on the slate at low ownership as long as you're willing to, take some risks at pitcher.
That's right. DeGrom definitely though. I mean, if you're playing well, you know what? We'll get into the strategy that comes along with that. But look, I'm with you here when, with the Oakland Bats. They will be popular, but uh, it will be very interesting to see where the priorities come, and will Jacob DeGrom be prioritized over them? And as you just pointed out, all of that, there is a lot of strategy that goes into it. But I will be interested to see how this shakes out once things lock up. Uh, the other side with Baltimore, Brett Anderson is not good, but he's also just one of these guys that has done a pretty decent job of limiting a ton of damage. And we've seen it over the years. Last season, 56% ground ball rate. Home run per nine rate was right around one. So not bad, pretty average there in all respects. A lot different than Marco Estrada, but he's still a lefty that is not great. Neither is Baltimore. I'm far less inclined to target them today than I did yesterday, even if they won't be as popular. I just don't like this matchup nearly as much. What about you? You like Baltimore?
That's where I'm at as well. I like Trey Mancini individually. He
Yes,
really,
so do I.
yeah, really seems like he's coming around this year and kind of building off his 2017 after losing a lot of last year to an injury. But other than that, you're not like Jonathan VR is okay, but his price tag has come way up. It's not a particularly good running matchup. He is playing over his head right now. I think he's an okay hitter, but he's not what he has been to start out this year, I don't think. So you're kind of just overpaying for performance. And then, they're cheap on FanDuel. They are cheap on Yahoo, except for on Yahoo, VR and Mancini still aren't that cheap, and the other guys aren't very good. FanDuel, you have so many cheap hitters that it doesn't really matter. And then DraftKings, because their pricing has gotten tighter, you're basically talking about a bunch of really bad hitters on the Orioles being more or less the same price as a bunch of really good hitters on other teams. So it makes it really tough for me to get there outside of like some Mancini one-offs.
Yep, I'm with you there. Let's talk about Philly and Washington. We've got Steven Strasburg and we have Aaron Nola. Aaron Nola, and by the way, Josh and I discussed this at length today on the strategy show because there's several ways to look at this. One of the ways to look at Aaron Nola is, all right, well, last start he was terrible. Gave up 3 home runs to this same Washington team. Walked 2, only struck out 2, went 3 innings. It was a brutal, brutal game. One of his worst starts of his career. And then you could say, well, his first start, he went 6 innings with 1 run and 8 Ks. Yeah, but he walked 5 batters, clearly didn't have his best stuff, but because he's good, he managed to get by. So what I mean by this is either you're saying there's nothing wrong with him, he just is a blip on the radar. His changeup has been just awful. It's so easily hittable in that last start, but that's just missing his spots, didn't have his good stuff. Or you say maybe there's something going on here. Which side do you, or which one of these do you side with today? Before even talking about whether you're playing him or not, where do you side on in terms of that was just a bad start, the changeup looked terrible, or and nothing's wrong with him, or maybe we should look into this further?
Yeah, I mean, so far I'm still on the side that there's probably nothing wrong with him. I'm not treating it like there is. I think this start is another one. Obviously you're going to want to pay close attention afterwards to how this stuff looked. But as of right now, I'm still treating him like he's just coming off of a bad start.
All right, so let's just segue that straight into pitching talk here with Aaron Nola and Steven Strasburg. You're getting price points that are not that crazy on some of these guys. I think Yahoo's a bit different. Aaron Nola's 51, Strasburg's 49, where DeGrom's 60 and Cole is 55. On DraftKings, Strasburg's 97, Nola's 94. And then on FanDuel, you have Nola at 10-2 and Strasburg at 10-5, basically only $400 less than Garrett Cole. So in context, there are some pretty different prices or some big disparities in pricing when you're looking at Cole and DeGrom towards Strasburg and Nola, depending on the site.
Yeah, and it does make it site dependent here. As far as Strasburg goes, I'm not really all that interested anywhere, just because I have a ton of respect for this Philadelphia offense. It is a park downgrade for Strasburg. He is, a little bit more expensive than Nola, even by a few $100s on DraftKings, which is the only site where I really feel the need to go to either of these guys. Aaron Nola, on the other hand, at 9,400 on DraftKings, I think is appealing because he's 2,200 less than DeGrom, but he's also 1,100 less than Garrett Cole. Whereas on FanDuel, he's only a few hundred less than Cole. On Yahoo, he's $4 less than Cole. I'd rather get to Garrett Cole if I can, and I think that that's pretty easy to do on FanDuel and on Yahoo, whereas it's pretty difficult on DraftKings. So I do have quite a bit of Aaron Nola on DraftKings specifically. In lineups where I can't quite get to DeGrom, I'm going to Nola over Cole in most of those lineups. There are 6 righties, including Strasburg, in the Washington lineup, so I do like that for Nola. Obviously, he's been good over the years. He does a good job limiting damage to righties. He, has good strikeout numbers against righties, but also throughout his career, he's benefited strikeout wise from pitching at home, which I don't think is really surprising. While it is a hitter's park as far as home runs and run production goes, it is one of the better parks where you see strikeout numbers tick up for pitchers. And that's been the case for Nola, who struck out 29.9% of hitters at home last season. So I do prefer him from an upside standpoint when he's in Philly. And that's the case here, facing 6 righties. So I'm taking my chances at a sub 10K price tag on DraftKings.
Yeah, I get it. I'd like to think there's nothing wrong with him, but God, I couldn't believe how bad that changeup looked. I mean, it was just, I'm not a hitter, I'm not standing at the plate, but you'd watch it and they tracked it the whole way. It was very easy to hit. Should really go back and watch that, but hopefully it's not an issue today and we won't have to worry about it. What about hitters here? Rhys Hoskins double dong yesterday, has looked really strong lately, hitting the ball out of his mind. Gene Segura doesn't strike out. Anthony Rendon is pretty cheap on DraftKings continually, but I wouldn't say this is the greatest hitting environment for either of them, despite being at a hitter-friendly park and in nice hitter-friendly temperatures. Still 2 good pitchers on the mound for the Nats and the Phillies.
And a lot of spots on the slate that do not have good pitchers.
For
So,
sure.
a high opportunity cost as well. 2 guys that did stand out for me, though, Harper from the Phillies and Rendon from the Nats. You mentioned Rendon's price tag is cheap, but also if you look, like Nola's go-to pitch against righties is his curveball. Rendon over the last couple of seasons has swinging strike percentages of like sub 5% against right-handed curveballs, and he's hit them for power. The price tag is cheap as well for a hitter as good as Rendon. So it's a deep third base position is the problem, but Rendon's my favorite hitter from the Nats, and then Harper, for obvious reasons, from Philadelphia. But Strasburg, the reason that he's basically a splits neutral guy and he's good against lefties is that he has that really good changeup. Harper's put up very, very good numbers against the pitch in the past, so I don't mind Harper one-offs if you're playing 150 lineups.
All right. Fair enough. Yeah, and I never have an issue with that either. Just not somebody that I'm prioritizing by any stretch. Let's talk about the Mets and the Minnesota Twins, because Jacob deGrom is fantastic. Right now, the lowest implied total on the slate is the Twins, and it's not close. Okay, the Yankees are at 3.4, Giants are at 3.6. Washington 3.7, Texas 3.9, Minnesota 2.5. 2.5. This is really as low as you'll see it go throughout the year. I think Scherzer may have had a 2.3 against Miami last year, but it doesn't get much better than this. Minus 241 on the money line. It's just a massively favorable situation for deGrom. So let's go ahead and talk about him. He's $60 on Yahoo. If you took all of the pitchers on this slate, even the ones that aren't starting, meaning Scherzer and Verlander and everybody, deGrom is the most expensive pitcher of any team anywhere on Yahoo. And I would imagine the same can be said for DraftKings as well. Oh no, Scherzer a little bit more, but you get the point. He's super pricey. He's also ridiculously good. And all to start the season, he's got 24 strikeouts in 13 innings, 8 hits, 2 walks, and 0 earned runs across 2 starts. He's been a monster already.
Right, and obviously the number 1 pitcher on the slate in terms of talent, like he's a better pitcher than Nola, he's a better pitcher than Cole, as good as I think those 2 guys are. There's an argument to be made for deGrom being the best pitcher in baseball, and it's a Minnesota lineup missing their designated hitter, so they're down a bat, and in their case, it's one of their most powerful bats in Nelson Cruz. So getting to deGrom, if you can, is clearly a good move. He's someone that I would be starting my cash games around, just because pitching really is not that solid on this slate, and so locking in those points is a good way to go. In tournaments, though, I still like him. I'm trying to get him in as many lineups as I can. But if you did want to try and find reasons to feel better about not having him in your lineup, if you can't get there, looking at this Minnesota lineup, they don't really help you in terms of strikeouts. The DeGrom stuff obviously is good enough that he's going to rack them up on his own. But since the start of 2017 against right-handed pitching, Max Kepler's at 15.5%. Astudillo still has not struck out in the major leagues against a righty. 84 plate appearances there, but even going back to the minors, he doesn't strike out, he doesn't walk. Rosario is at 17.7%. Marwin Gonzalez is at like just shy of 22%. Polanco's at 15.5%. Not a ton of strikeouts in this lineup. Obviously down towards the bottom, you get some with Buxton, with the pitcher. So it's not that I expect him to have a bad game, but it's just the kind of team where, and especially on DraftKings, where hitters are really expensive and it's tough to get the ground and tough to get high upside lineups with him. It wouldn't be surprising if it's one of those games that's just really annoying to have an expensive pitcher because like he gets to 2 strikes and then gets a ground ball out and then gets to 2 strikes and gets a pop up, stuff like that. Like that's how I would, if he doesn't come through, I would expect it to be that kind of stuff, not him actually having a bad start.
Yeah, like a 7-inning, 1-run, 5K type of game that you're
or
worried
even
about?
7-7 and like 1-run type of thing, but
Right.
where he gets you like 24 points or 25 points and doesn't get you like 35.
Yep. No, it's definitely possible. Twins have the fifth highest outside swing rate this season. Every game I've watched of them, they've been really aggressive in the zone. So I was surprised to see that they're only like 14th in zone swing rate, but they are pretty aggressive, especially early on in the at bat, which will benefit Jacob DeGrom. But there are also a couple guys, like you said, that aren't going to strike out. Obviously, or I won't say obviously, you're not targeting Twins bats though, correct?
Correct. If I had to go to one guy on the Twins, it would be $3,400 Astudillo
Yep.
at catcher on DraftKings, where you
Just
have
because
to
you
go out
put the
there.
ball in play.
Right. He's going to hit the ball. Something's going to happen. If he hits the ball 5 times, there's a pretty good chance that he gets you a few points.
Yeah, and 3,400 for a catcher on DraftKings now is like minimum salary with the way they've priced them.
Right. I mean, if you're looking for a catcher in that range today, your options are basically Astudillo, Martin Maldonado, who is trash, Omar Narvaez, who is slightly better than trash, and John Ryan Murphy, who is somewhere right around Narvaez.
Yep, and Narvaez isn't batting. He's batting what, 7th again. So I don't think it's crazy to go to him against Junis, but we'll get there in a little bit. Kyle Gibson, I have an affinity for him. I just hate the way he pitches. It sounds weird, right? Oh, I love the guy, but I hate the way he pitches. You know what I mean by that.
Love his stuff. Wish someone would tell him how to use it.
Yep, pretty much. Somebody ship him to Houston. That would,
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if Kyle Gibson went to Houston, he'd be a totally different pitcher. But he's not, Adam. He's still in Minnesota, and even though he's got some of the best like off speed and secondary stuff, he really does. If you look at the numbers, especially from a swing and miss standpoint, he just leans on that 2-seam fastball 40% of the time.
Right, and it's really frustrating. So I'm getting to some Gibson on the 2 pitcher sites just because he's 6,500 and hopefully he pitches well. But he's not my favorite guy in this range. We'll talk about that when we get there. But also working against him is that there's only 4 righties in the lineup for the Mets. Granted, one of the lefties is Jacob DeGrom, so that's not bad. But Gibson last year struck out 18.8% of lefties compared to 24.5% of righties. In his first start this year, he did throw his changeup about 31% of the time to lefties, which was good to see. It would still be better if he just threw his slider to everyone. But the changeup did have close to a 17% swinging strike percentage last year, and anything he's throwing instead of his fastball is beneficial. So that was at least good to see. Still a scary lineup too, though. Like Brandon Nimmo and Michael Conforto, I think are 2 really good outfield plays here. I just like how they grade out against the stuff that Gibson throws. But then Cano's a tough out. Peter Alonso is a good hitter. Wilson Ramos not in the lineup helps. But Jeff McNeil is not a bad hitter either. It's not a bad lineup. So it's more so that Gibson's getting into my lineups because I don't have that many other options than because I really like Gibson.
Yep. All right. That makes sense. At his price right there, I don't have an issue with it. It's just more or less wishing like Gibson could be. I'm not even kidding. He could be a 9K pitcher, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. Let's not forget 2 years ago, Garrett Cole was priced at like, 7,500, and now he's a 10, 11K pitcher. And it's not like he changed much outside of how often he threw certain pitches. Maybe one day it'll happen with Gibson. Any New York Mets bats?
Nimmo and Conforto. I actually like both of those guys quite a bit.
All right. St. Louis and LA Dodgers, Ross Stripling, Dakota Hudson. That's a name right there for you. He surprised me with some of these numbers, Adam, is an extreme ground ball pitcher. And what would you do if I told you that in 111 and two-third innings at AAA in 2018, he allowed one home run, 27 and a third innings with the Cardinals last year, all of them out of the bullpen. He allowed 0 home runs. He has done an insanely good job of 2 things: getting ground balls and keeping the ball in the yard. Even though he's been a very low strikeout guy, he has done a great job of those 2 things, which for fantasy purposes can make somebody easy to avoid.
Yeah, so I didn't even mention Dakota Hudson in my deep dive article today. We didn't have the Dodgers lineup yet, and I did mention several Dodgers hitters, and I still like the 3 lefties that are in the lineup for the Dodgers: Muncy, Bellinger, and
Yeah.
Peterson. Like you said, Hudson does not miss bats. His stuff doesn't play as well against lefties as righties. Real hard fastball, slider, curveball kind of guy, but mostly that fastball and slider. So he's someone that I would expect to struggle with lefties. But this Dodgers lineup, I think, is really beneficial for Hudson. You mentioned the ground ball numbers. If he is, and at some point in his career, I think he will start getting strikeouts because the stuff's good. If he is going to strike guys out, it's more likely to be righties than lefties with the arsenal that he has. And so far during his time in the majors, which it's tough to get too much from it because so much of it was out of the bullpen last year, but he's allowed a 236 expected WOBA and a .049 expected ISO to righties. The Dodgers, for whatever reason, are running out 5 righties plus a pitcher. Going from Alex Verdugo to Chris Taylor gets you a hitter that strikes out about 28% of the time instead of 17% of the time. Austin Barnes is around 22%. Bellinger and Muncy are lefties, but they're mid-20s. It's as good a lineup for Hudson as the Dodgers could have run out there. So I have bumped him up a bit. He's right in line now with Kyle Gibson for me, amongst the SP2 options.
Okay. Velocity down a lot this year, but that's because he's pitching as a starter. So I don't really take much from that. I mean, he sat on like 98, 97 mile per hour fastball in 2018. This year, pretty much around. Well, I guess he throws the 2-seamer a lot more than the 4-seam, so it's not down that much, right? It's 94. But still, I mean, like you said, he doesn't have terrible stuff, and he does 2 things that are really important to limiting runs. I don't know what type of strikeout upside he has tonight, but I'm not huge on targeting the Dodgers. And now that Corey Seager, who was only 3,100 on FanDuel, is out of the lineup, that also makes things a little bit more difficult. On Yahoo, you've got Jock Peterson at 18. Compared to the rest of the lineup or the outfield position, he's pretty far down there. And then Bellinger is 26, where pretty much, I mean, I guess he's the 3rd highest priced outfielder in this matchup. Are you willing to pay that much for Bellinger, where he's outfield eligible?
Yeah, I do like all 3 of the lefties here. Hudson not missing left-handed bats really, I think, plays into the strengths of Muncy and Bellinger because their biggest issues are their strikeouts. Peterson doesn't really strike out anyway. So I am willing to pay for Bellinger. Obviously, it's a deep position. He's not, my top guy, but getting like mini stacks of the Dodgers lefties, I think is fine.
All right, what are your thoughts on Ross Stripling and these St. Louis bats? For me, it's kind of a no and no, but
Yep.
maybe you're different here.
Nope, that's about where I am as well. I am getting a lot more Nola than Stripling as far as pitchers go. I'm not really getting to Cardinals bats either. I did bump up. I mentioned it in the deep dive article. I bumped up Paul DeJong specifically, just because for one, the shortstop position is not very good. Two, he's a good hitter that has power, and three, he actually grades out pretty well against the breaking stuff that Stripling throws. So he's the guy that stood out for me from the Cardinals, and the price tag and position are pretty nice there as well. But outside of that, I'm not really getting to the Cardinals or to Stripling.
All right. Well, we've got 6 more games to go here. This one's interesting. Garrett Cole, Jonathan Luisiga. He's not a bad pitcher, man. I actually like his stuff. It's going up against the Houston team, though, that really makes it difficult on opposing pitchers. As far as strikeouts go, he can miss bats, but I think Josh said it this morning. They don't miss balls, which is pretty true. This season alone, Houston is striking out at the second lowest clip, 0.1% higher than the Pirates, 17.1%. Actually, you know what? That might be, let's see here. Is that going back to the start of last season, which would be actually just as viable because the lineup's mostly the same. Yeah, 17.1% since the start of 2018, Adam. And then Garrett Cole, of course, he is less expensive than our boy Jacob deGrom at 55 on Yahoo. deGrom is 60. On DraftKings, Garrett Cole is 10.5. deGrom is 11.6. So you've got $1,100 discount there. And on FanDuel, $1,300 cheaper at 10.9 from a 12.2 Jacob deGrom. Let's start with pitching with the home team and Garrett Cole.
He's like the opposite of Aaron Nola for me, whereas on DraftKings, I'm getting to Nola and I wouldn't get to Nola anywhere else. I would get to Cole on Yahoo and on FanDuel instead of Nola. I think that he's better. I think that the Yankees, while they are still a scary offense, even with their injuries, I still give the advantage to Cole. The strikeout stuff's really good. I just don't think he's quite as good as Jacob deGrom is, and so I don't think that he's $1,100 better than Aaron Nola on DraftKings. So it's really site dependent for me. If I can't quite get to deGrom on FanDuel, I have no issue going to Garrett Cole. Same goes for Yahoo. On DraftKings, again, I would rather just either get to deGrom or save the money and go to Nola.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, Josh earlier today had a different thought on that. It's good to get different opinions because he's of the mindset that getting to Garrett Cole makes a lot of sense. And look, I'm not sure there's really a wrong answer here, but you're saying you would rather you see enough upside in Nola here to say I'll pay up or I'll just take another $1,000 savings down from Cole and $2,000 down from Jacob deGrom.
Right. Yeah, I don't see that big of a difference between Cole and Nola, whereas I do see that big of a difference between deGrom and every other pitcher.
Right. And no, that makes perfect sense. Look, Garrett Cole is definitely good. He's really good and he's got great strikeout stuff. The one thing, how much does this play into it for you? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 righties in the lineup. If you mentioned it, I had to step away for a quick. What?
I did not.
Yeah, so there's 8 righties in the lineup. Garrett Cole is still good against hitters from both sides of the plate. So don't get it twisted here. This is still a very, very good pitcher who has stuff that he can deploy against any handed hitter. But last season, he struck lefties out at 41%, righties out at 28%, and was also better overall at holding lefties to a lower weighted on base average, a lower isolated slugging, all of these marks. Also, far less home runs per 9. Does that do anything for you when making your decision, knowing that they have 8 straight righties in the lineup behind Brett Gardner?
Not really, because I don't totally buy into those numbers. It doesn't make me any less comfortable, obviously, but I just don't totally buy into those numbers because it used to be that he was really good against righties and sucked against lefties. Then he came to Houston where, they fixed a lot of his stuff and now he's lights out against, both sides, but even more so against lefties. I don't know that he continues being better against lefties, but I do expect him to just be really good against everyone.
All right. Sounds good to me. What about hitters from this game? Or if you want to talk about Luisiga, we can do that for a moment.
No, I mean, I'm not really interested in Luisiga because Houston obviously is a really tough matchup, but also we know that the Yankees have a really good bullpen, and more often than not, when they have these guys like Luisiga making these starts, as soon as they get through 5 innings or get in any sort of trouble. They get them out of the game as quickly as they can. So I don't really want to go there just because of the matchup and the short leash. I think that as a full stack, Houston makes sense because I don't expect them to have a lot of ownership. I haven't checked our ownership projections yet, but I'm assuming that they won't. And on DraftKings, though, they are pretty cheap for the kind of upside that you get. 4,300 on Seager, 4K on Brantley, both really appealing price tags. Altuve, Bregman, those guys are fine as well. Correa. So they do offer a lot of upside relative to their price points. Like if you talk about the talent of hitters, obviously not the matchups that they're going to get, but if you talk the talent of hitters and you tell me that everyone on Houston is less expensive than pretty much everyone on Oakland, I would lean towards Houston, especially assuming that Oakland's going to garner a bit more ownership because of their implied run total.
I'm with you. Uh, I thought they were going to be more expensive when doing the strategy. So I'm looking at it and say, oh God, they're a lot less expensive than I thought they would be. Usually they're priced through the roof.
Right.
Who do you think is right now projected to have the highest ownership on DraftKings?
Offense, you like stack, you mean?
Yeah. No, individual player, but it's an offensive player.
Oh, Arenado or Story?
Jonathan Daza.
Oh, yeah. I forgot he was leading off.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's 2,900 on DraftKings. When do you get seriously? I don't know if I guess we've had a Robbie Grossman or whatever, but in terms of location and leadoff spot, yeah, he's
Yeah,
not
I think
even.
that'll be a fun one to talk about when we get to that game too, just from a
Oh,
roster
no
construction
question,
standpoint.
no question. So Daza's not on FanDuel, and he is not on Yahoo. DraftKings only. Unless he's in here with a different name and I'm missing it, but I don't believe that's the case. So looks like we've only got him on DraftKings today, and he is $2,900. But we've still got a couple games to get to before that. Actually, I believe we have one to get to before that, and that is Kansas City and Seattle. Adam, we've got a streaking Mariners team. If you watched the deeper dive yesterday, all right, you got there. Seattle, big time. Encarnacion with home runs in the same multiple home runs, 2 home runs in the same inning. He has turned it on. 3 home runs over his last 2 games. The whole Mariners offense right now is just on a torrid pace. And Jake Junis is not a bad pitcher, but if there's one aspect of his game that's a glaring weakness is when he's not hitting his spots, he will give up a lot of long home runs. It might not be the greatest time to face this Seattle Mariners team for Junis, especially given that the Mariners' power comes not exclusively, because you do have Vogelbach and Bruce, but a lot of it's from the right side of the plate. I think Junis could get into some trouble here, but we'll get your take on this too. Junis and Marco Gonzalez at Kauffman Stadium, temperatures up around 75 degrees at first pitch.
Yep, I like the Mariners bats a lot here. I wish Mitch Haniger was in the lineup, but he isn't. But still, with Junis, you have a guy who has a really good slider. He uses it to get a lot of swings and misses, gets a lot of strikeouts on it, but his fastball is not very good. And so he's, as far as getting swings and misses, he's like a one-pitch pitcher. He really needs guys to be, swinging and missing and not having success against the slider, which is scary because, for one, if he's behind in counts or just not locating well, he's going to get destroyed on his fastball. But two, you get a team like Seattle that these guys actually have a lot of success against sliders as far as power goes, and even expected WOBA. It's a pitch that normally you see expected WOBAs down in like the 200s, and these like Santana, Bruce, Encarnacion are all well over 300 over the last couple of years, with ISOs up above 200. So any mistake that Junis makes, I expect these guys to be able to take advantage of it, and it makes it a really scary spot for him. Just good hitters there. Ryan Healy has power as well. Narvaez, not a particularly good hitter, but again, he's a $3,400 catcher on an offense that I think is in a spot to score a lot of runs, so he's perfectly fine. But also behind Junis, you have a not very good Kansas City bullpen, so it's a spot where the Mariners should be able to tackle on runs if they get to Junis early. I'm going right back to him tonight.
So am I. I'll ride that wave until it crashes, especially when you're not exactly chasing. It's still Jake Junis, and I could see him getting blasted here. Marco Gonzalez, on the other hand, You're not going to get a lot of swinging strikes. I can't tell you how many times I've said the same thing about him, but it's true each time. He's great at getting called strikes. He, good placement on the ball. He can locate, but he's not really someone that's going to miss a lot of bats. 6.5% swinging strike rate through his first couple of starts, your first 3 starts this season. I mean, you're not going to get the strikeouts here, Adam. Pretty average ground ball pitcher, but also, oddly enough, does a good job of limiting the long ball. Curious to get your take on the Kansas City bats and or Marco Gonzalez.
On DraftKings right now, Gonzalez is my 3rd or 4th highest owned pitcher, I think. I don't understand the implied run total for Kansas City here. It makes no sense to me.
What is it?
4.6.
Yeah, that seems a little bit extreme.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm getting Gonzalez. Sorry, so he's not my 3rd or 4th. He's like my 6th most owned pitcher, just because he's more expensive than the Hudson Gibson price range. But I like the spot more for him than I do for Kansas City. Like, I'm getting a lot of Whit Merrifield, but other than that, I'm not really getting to Kansas City bats here. If you look at this Kansas City lineup against lefties since the start of 2017, Merrifield, Soler, and Mondesi, the only hitters in the lineup with a WOBA over 300 or an ISO over 124, 124 being Chris Owings. There's no power here. There's not good hitters here. There are strikeouts here. The only guys with sub 20% strikeout percentages are Alex Gordon and Merrifield. Not that Gonzalez gets a lot of strikeouts, but I just don't see anything here that scares me away from Gonzalez. The only thing that keeps his ownership down for me a little bit is wanting to get bats into my lineup and wanting to get DeGrom into my lineup. That, $1,000 between him and the $6,500 range matters.
Right. I hear you. I don't have as much interest in Gonzalez just because he needs the win or he needs 8 innings. I just really don't see any way you're getting the upside. But if you're playing a bunch of different pitchers, then it makes sense. He wouldn't be my like cash SP2 or anything like that, or even really in 3 max. Any hitters that we haven't talked about you want to touch on individually before we move to Coors Field?
No. Mentioned Merrifield from the Royals, and then Santana, Bruce, and Encarnacion be my top 3 from Seattle.
All right, sounds good. Before we get to Coors and close it out with our last 4 games, I want to let you know that if you've yet to check out awesemo.com, we'd love to have you do so. And you can get 50% off. That's right, half off your first month of subscription at awesemo.com simply by using the promo code Deeper Dive. One word, Deeper Dive, all one word. Just click sign up on the home screen, awesemo.com, AWESEMO.com. Select your plan and put in your coupon code before checking out. It's that simple. And whether it be all of our player projections, our ownership projections, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, the lineup builder, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, his content, our MMA, NASCAR, PGA, MLB, NHL, and you name it. Every sport, they got DFS. We've got you covered on so much more that we'd take up too much time talking about it. But when you sign up using that promo code Deeper Dive and you get your 50% off, say hi to us in the premium Slack chat once you do, and we'll be sure to show you around free of charge. All right, Adam, let's talk Colorado and Atlanta. Max Fried, Hendelman Marquez. I want to talk first about Max Fried. And I want to ask you a couple of things. One, we know that this guy has good strikeout stuff, no question. But 2, how is that curveball going to work at Coors? Because that is his go-to out pitch. No question. That's what he leans on to get swinging strikes, to get batters to swing out of their shoes behind in counts. When the batter's behind in counts, I don't really know if he has anything that he can supplant that with like Marquez does. When Marquez pitches at home, you'll see a lot more slider usage, which is why the second half of the season he looks so much better than the first half. Let's talk about this pitching matchup.
It's a terrifying spot for Max Fried. I love his stuff. We talked about it before. I'm hoping he just gets blown up today and I can get him at low ownership next time because I'm not doing it today. He has a very good curveball, like one of the better curveballs in baseball.
Which makes it even scarier because he relies on it so much.
Exactly. Like it's the pitch for him. And it's just kind of, science that it's not going to be as effective in the altitude. Like, it's still probably a good pitch because it's a
Yeah.
phenomenal pitch otherwise, but it's a less effective pitch in these conditions than it is otherwise. And he has things working against him anyway. It's not like this is a guy that, consistently throws strikes and isn't walking guys or getting behind in counts. When he's ahead in counts, he's phenomenal, but he has plenty of issues with walks and with falling behind in counts and putting extra guys on base. So it would be a risky spot anyway. Then you take away his best pitch to some extent. And I just don't really feel the need to go to him here. I'd much rather be loading up on Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, and then whatever other Rockies you want.
All right. Well, what about Herman Marquez against an Atlanta team that really isn't going to offer that many strikeouts? Also, Atlanta pretty expensive because of Coors Field. That should come as no surprise to anybody. On DraftKings, they're way up there. On Yahoo, first base, Freddie Freeman, the most expensive first baseman. Ozzie Albies, second most expensive second baseman. And you're going to get this, right, with both of these teams from position to position. That's just the way it is, and that's the way Coors Field is priced. You're even going to get guys like Chris Ionetta is out of the lineup. Who do we have today, Adam? We have
Tony Walters.
Tony. Oh God, Tony Walters should be Chris Davis on FanDuel price. By the way, what do you think of that? I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. Why not just make him minimum salary like all the other bad hitters?
Well, because the good hitters there are 2,800 and barely above minimum salary, so I guess they needed to differentiate more.
Yeah, but with one player.
Right, yeah. They did it a couple years ago. They did it a couple years ago against Clayton Kershaw with, like, everyone. I think it was, like, Kershaw against the Giants. All the Giants were, like, $10 or something. But I don't know. It's dumb.
Yeah, well, all right. Talk to me about Marquez and the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not getting to Marquez here either. He's not priced down enough for me to want to go there. I don't like taking guys against Atlanta anyway. They're just so good at putting the ball in play. I do kind of like the price tags on Atlanta, at least on DraftKings, though, because so many hitters there are expensive that getting, $4,300 Inciarte or $5,100 Freeman or $5,200 Acuna in Coors Field isn't that expensive relative to other guys. Like, Acuna is less expensive than Davis, Chris Davis of Oakland. So I think that there's kind of a pricing discrepancy where they're not quite as expensive. I got a lot of Atlanta stacks in my first crunch. I do intend on cutting back a little bit there just because I know my projections don't account for Marquez being as good as I think Marquez is. So I'll be cutting back a little bit, but I do have some interest in Atlanta.
Okay. Fair enough. It is Coors Field. Marquez is so good, though, man.
Yeah.
He's so good. By the way, he's also using his slider a lot to start the season. Like a lot, even more than he was using it over the second half of last season. So that'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. I don't know if he's going to continue throwing it 30% of the time, but at Coors Field, that's only going to work more in his favor. So far, the pitch has on the year a ridiculous 25% whiff rate. I mean, that's insane. He's thrown it 62 times and he's got 16 whiffs. That's crazy, man. Those are really good numbers.
Yes, they are.
Really good numbers. The curveball, he's thrown 37 times. He's got 11 whiffs on the curveball. Oh my God. I mean, really, the curve and the slider are so nasty right now that as long as his four-seamer is decent, oh wait, it's 97 miles per hour. 96 miles per hour. Like his
stuff's nasty.
What?
His stuff is nasty.
It's so filthy, man. Like the moment he added that slider last year or improved it and you said, wait, this is actually a really good pitch.
Yeah.
You're like, now he's got a sick curveball, a high 90s fastball, and the slider. He's going to be really tough to hit all season long.
Yeah, I'm still, even just talking about him, like I'm reconsidering if maybe I should be going to him here in Coors. But Atlanta just still scares the hell out of me.
Sure, look, I'm not trying to change any minds. I'm just saying I think it's pretty ridiculous how good he has become over such a short period of time. Uh, and I just love the guy's stuff.
Yeah,
The thing is, like 8,800 though, it's tough. I like you said, I said the same thing this morning. I think he should be a little bit cheaper at Coors against Atlanta. Like if you're factoring matchup and park, that should you would think that would bring him down a little bit. He's a lot cheaper than all of these guys on Yahoo, though. I think there's some tournament appeal there where DeGrom is 60, Cole 55, Nola 51. Herman Marquez is all the way down at 43. He's $3 more than Marco Gonzalez.
that's
So
a really good point. Yeah, because like DraftKings, he's close enough to Nola where I just give the edge to Nola because I
right.
mean I think Nola's a really good pitcher too. But yeah, if you're getting like that kind of discount on Yahoo, I agree.
Yeah. And we'll get to the rest of these guys, like Freddie Peralta, way cheaper there. I don't love the spot for him, but we'll talk about him anyway. Same with Joey Lucchesi. Let's close it out with Colorado bats. Adam, you've got Jonathan Daza leading off, Tapia batting second, Arenado, Story, Desmond, Fuentes, Hampson, Walters, and Marquez. The honest to God truth here is that outside of maybe your 2 through 5, this is not that scary of a lineup, but it's the meat of that order that I guess we're gonna have to worry about for Max Fried. But man, pretty weak here. No David Dahl, or he's hurt. Blackman is out. Obviously, you get the lefty-lefty matchup, but even so, like this is I don't know, man.
Yeah,
Skeleton crew.
I would. You said 2 through 5. I would switch it to like 3 through 4.
I said
But
3 through 5,
okay.
but you're right. Arenado and Story. I'm putting Desmond in there just because he has a bit of
Yeah.
power. But yeah, basically, if I said 2 through 5, I definitely didn't mean to include Raimel Tapia.
Yeah, I'd be tempted to just roll the dice on Freed, except these guys still don't strike out.
Mhm.
Daz is like a 15% strikeout guy. Walters doesn't strike out. Hampson doesn't strike out. And, obviously the middle of the order is really good. But as far as the bats go here, I think it's really, really interesting. You mentioned Daza is not on Yahoo. He's not on FanDuel, but he is on the site that has the most ridiculous hitter pricing in the industry. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I actually enjoy it. But when you get value, it obviously opens up a lot and it helps out with a lot of things. But there are a couple ways to look at that. For one, you get a guy leading off in Coors Field for $2,900 point per dollar. That's great. Cash games should be the first hitter in your lineup. There's no reason for him not to be. On the other side, though, everyone's going to go there because everyone looks to build their lineups the same way, and it's to get the best pitching they can, and then find value hitters and go from there. Value hitters at the top of the order and go from there. So he's going to be really, really popular. If you look at his steamer projections, he projects for a 323 WOBA, an 86 WRC plus, a 115 ISO. The guy has no power. The guy's not a good hitter. He's fast. And he puts the ball in play. So in tournaments, I don't want to waste an outfield spot on a popular guy that I'm hoping he gets a couple singles. And I think that being underweight on him in tournaments is probably a really good idea. And then, obviously, if you're playing cash, get him in there because he's just so cheap.
The Daza will be in what feels like almost every Jacob DeGrom lineup. I mean, if there's one thing about him here at 2,900 is it makes it a little bit easier to get DeGrom in there.
For what it's worth, though, in my initial DraftKings crunch, I got to it's not loading right now, but somewhere around 50% DeGrom and like 9% Daza. So I didn't 49% DeGrom and 9% Daza. So like
You didn't need him.
no.
All right. Yeah. Look, I have a slightly different opinion on it just because it is Coors. And look, I have a lot of respect for Max Fried, no question. But putting the ball in play at Coors, a guy that doesn't strike out like Daza, that has a very legitimate opportunity to see 10 or 5 plate appearances against also an Atlanta bullpen that has really labored through the first couple of weeks of the season. To me, I really don't worry too much about the ownership. Now, I get your point saying you don't want to take up an outfield spot, but I don't really care who you are. 2,900 batting leadoff at Coors Field, where it's not just a homer's park, but also one where even a Ben Revere could have success, or because the ability to gap doubles into a very spacious outfield. I think 2,900 is really, really favorable with the platoon advantage in the leadoff spot. So Let's move on here. We'll talk Texas, Arizona. Zach Greinke, Adam, has allowed 6 home runs over his first 2 starts. He also struck out 10 Padres his last time out. He's $8,900 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's $9,300. And on Yahoo, he's $4,500, which is really prohibitive. But throwing all 3 sites pricing out there, you've got Mike Minor on the other side against Arizona, coming off a scoreless 7-inning gem with 7 Ks against Houston. What do we got for pitching here?
I'm not looking to get to Greinke here. I'd rather just find the money for Nola or go cheaper. I still just have trouble buying into Greinke. I think that he'll age slower than most people with his stuff, but I still just have trouble really getting there. Especially last season, we did see a split in his strikeouts between righties and lefties, and he's facing a lot of lefties here in what will be favorable hitting conditions in Arizona with, I believe, the roof open. At 90 degrees. So I actually have a lot of interest, especially on DraftKings, in Texas bats because they're just cheaper relative to their upside than really any other team on the slate. It's the same thing we said about Houston, except they're even cheaper than Houston is. Anytime you can get Chu for 3,900 and Mazzara for 4K and Gallo for 4,700, I think that it's pretty appealing. The thing that sucks is their lineup has Logan Forsythe and Patrick Wisdom and Jeff Mathis and a pitcher instead of Asdrubal Cabrera and Ronald Guzman. So actually, after seeing that lineup, maybe a little bit more interest in getting some shares of Greinke. But 1 through 5, I still just think there's a lot of upside for the price points from Texas.
Yeah, it feels like a spot that could work on both sides. But I was just, at least earlier today, I was really, really surprised by the projected ownership on these Ranger bats. I mean, really, really surprised. On DraftKings right now, Joey Gallo has 2% projected ownership. Shin-Soo Choo at 4%. I'll go a little bit further here. Odor is he's at 9%. Mazzara, I'm sure Mazzara is down super low as well. He is at 1%, Adam. I'll tell you what. Yeah, Greinke is still a good pitcher. And yeah, he's pitched at Chase, so it shouldn't, it's not going to make a huge difference. But he has allowed 6 home runs to start the year. He's clearly giving up a lot of very hittable balls over the heart of the plate. If you're talking about an entirely unowned Rangers team that has 4 lefties in the top 5 of the lineup, yeah, there's some strikeouts, no question, especially towards the bottom and the 5 and down. But give me the upside, the power upside on these low-owned Rangers bats any day of the week against Greinke, especially with how he's looked early on.
Yeah, and I'll even to step back a little bit further. I don't care about Greinke. It's not even about the matchup for me. Give me these Rangers prices against basically anyone that's not an elite pitcher in favorable hitting conditions, and I'll go there. I'll take the upside at low ownership.
And outside of Gallo, who he is perfectly reasonably priced. Look at the salary. Look at their price tags on DraftKings. Gallo on Yahoo is what, $22. Rougned Odor is $11. Rougned Odor at second base is $11. He's the same price basically as Chad Pinder and Kiner Falefa. I mean, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Seriously, that's really cheap. Mazzara is 16 and Shin-Soo Choo is 14. Man, you can easily stack them on DraftKings and on FanDuel, knowing that they have power, perfectly fine park. And like you said, yeah, it might not have all to do with Greinke, but it doesn't hurt that he's shown some serious homer-prone tendencies to start the year. And it came against the Dodgers and the San Diego Padres, neither of which are perfect hitter parks either. These weren't at Coors or Citizens Bank. These are neutral to pitcher-friendly venues. So I'm on board there. Quickly, what are your thoughts on Arizona against Texas? I will just throw it out, or against Minor. Flores with his splits has always been solid against lefties. Last season, a bit of a swing downward. But Christian Walker batting 5th, His limited splits against lefties, especially over the past couple of years, a ton of power from the right side with the platoon advantage. I'm not opposed to looking at some of these right-handed Diamondback hitters, especially expecting them to be at pretty low ownership as well.
Yeah, I'm basically playing both sides of this game across the board. Now that we've gotten that the weaker bottom of the order for Texas, I'll have some Greinke. I like the Texas bats that we talked about, but same goes for here. You have power in guys like Christian Walker. Flores has some. Kettle Marte has been the best hitter on the team over the last 3 years against left-handed pitching.
He's been very
Overall, he's been a completely average hitter, 170 ISO, 100 WRC plus. So even if you assume that he's going to trend back towards his overall numbers, it's still not a bad spot for him here in favorable hitting conditions. So I like the Arizona bats, but also the $6,300 price tag on Mike Minor, where you have to roster the two pitchers on DraftKings, is appealing enough. Like, I think he's an average pitcher. He has a changeup that he can throw to righties, which we know is a pitch that you need to kind of neutralize the other hand. It's a good enough pitch where if he's locating well, he gets a lot of pop-ups. He gets some fly ball outs, and he'll pick up enough strikeouts to pay off that price point. So not super confident in him. Like, I have less of him than I do of other guys that I'm not super confident in, like Gibson and Hudson. But I think that the price tag is cheap enough where I'm going to just end up getting him because it gives me a lot of upside.
All right. 2 to go here. We'll turn it over to Live Before Lock. We've got baseball and we have got basketball coming up after the deeper dive. That's right. Josh Engelman and Eddie Fear on the NBA Live Before Lock from 6 to 7. And Chris and Jake on MLB Live Before Lock taking you up to 7:05 Eastern time. That's when Baltimore and Oakland first pitch in Baltimore. All right, 2 to go. We'll get through these pretty quickly. San Francisco, San Diego, Joey Lucchesi, Derek Holland. I have interest in both pitchers today, but for the sake of time, I will let you give us your take on the pitchers for this game at Oracle Stadium.
I'll start with Lucchesi because I think it'll be quicker for me. But Yahoo price and FanDuel price, both really nice for Lucchesi. Not as interested on DraftKings. I certainly think that you can make an argument. If you preferred him over Nola, I wouldn't argue with you. The matchup obviously is a lot better. The
That was
ballpark's a
my
lot better.
stance earlier today, by the way, on the strategy show, that I thought it might sound crazy, but I did say that I could see myself going Lucchesi over Nola simply because of the matchup in Park.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy. I wouldn't talk anyone off of that. Right now, I have more Nola, but I don't think it's crazy.
Nola is the better pitcher. I mean, that's
Yeah.
true, but yeah.
Yeah. The Nats are just a much better team. The Park's a much better
Right.
park for hitters. Where I'm really interested in this game, though, is Derek Holland is my clear number one SP2, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He's my second highest owned pitcher on DraftKings right now, behind DeGrom, and it's not even that big of a difference in my ownership between him and DeGrom. We started liking him last season for one. He pitches well in Oracle, which pretty much everyone does, but he started throwing his slider more. It's been a really, really effective pitch. He's also upped his usage through his first couple of starts this year. Last season, he was throwing it about 21% of the time to righties. He's at 35.7% this season, 31.1% swinging strike percentage. He's gotten hit relatively hard his first couple of starts, but he hasn't had the easiest matchups there either. So I'm not too concerned about that. I just really like the ballpark. I like what he's throwing. It's not the cakewalk matchup against San Diego that it used to be. You have a pretty nice combination, actually, of right-handed power and guys that don't strike out a lot, like Kinsler and Machado, and even Renfroe against lefties. But on this slate, where it's really tough to get bats that you want and pitchers that you want, I'm just going pretty heavy on Derek Holland and hoping for the best.
Fair enough. And I have no issues with that. That was my one concern this morning on the strategy show, that, outside of Will Myers, and, to some extent, Frenmo Reyes, a lot of these guys do not strike out against lefties, right? Whether it's Margot or Renfroe, Hosmer, Kinsler, Machado. I guess you could say Hedges does a decent amount, but they got 5 or 6 guys that are going to be in this lineup with pretty low strikeout rates against lefties. Fortunately, of the 19 home runs Holland allowed last year, yes, all of them were against righties, but only 5 of them came in San Francisco. So this will definitely buoy his production. I think Holland's perfectly fine at that price point. I knew when you had mentioned that you liked a guy at that range more than Gibson, I think it was going to be Holland, and yeah. I don't blame you whatsoever. Quickly, because we need to get this last game in. Any hitters from this one? From San Diego?
No, I mean, like Machado, Renfroe, Kinsler's price tag's really nice, but Machado and Renfroe give you plenty of upside. I just clearly am going to be much heavier on the Derek Holland side of that.
I wish Villanueva was healthy so I could get his, home run per game against lefties,
Yeah.
even though that cooled off quite a bit. All right, Trevor Cahill was great last night, did us well. Now you've got Matt Harvey on the mound. I'll let you guys play Harvey. Freddie Peralta coming off a phenomenal start, 8 scoreless, 11 Ks, probably the best of his career. But $9,900 on DraftKings is strictly prohibitive. And then 83 on FanDuel. We can talk about that on Yahoo, the sponsor of the Deeper Dive, of course. $36, which is right around the same price, as Stripling, Marco Gonzalez, Lucchese, and such. But for me, I'll just tell you where I'm at, and I'll let you close this show out, Adam. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody, and it shouldn't be if you know my stance on Harvey. We don't have the Brewers lineup yet. We do have the Angels. Give me these Brewers lefties all day. I don't care what park they're at. Don't care if it's the Grand Canyon. From Shaw to Moustakas to Yelich, I just love lefties against Harvey, and he will continue to prove that he is not good against them. All right, Harvey Peralta, close us out, Adam.
With you on Peralta, would only have him sprinkled in on DraftKings because of the price, but I like the price on Yahoo. I like the price on FanDuel. Milwaukee's my number one stack on the slate. There are five lefties in the projected lineup with an ISO over 230.
Oh yeah, Thames as well because you got the DH. That's right.
Yeah, with an ISO over 230 since the start of the 2017 season. Then, by the way, you have Jesus Aguilar and Ryan Braun, who are also pretty damn good hitters. Lorenzo Cain isn't bad at the top. It's just a really, really deep lineup here. Harvey's not great against righties. He's flat out bad against lefties. It's just like the park's not good. That's the only thing I have to say here. Reasonable price tags on these guys. Multi-position eligibility on DraftKings that makes it really easy to mix and match. Yeah, I love Milwaukee.
Me too, man. Me too. And my guess is ownership won't be that high. What do you think on that?
I agree with you. Jacob deGrom also starting in a delay. I hadn't seen whether it's
I just saw that, but I didn't see the delay. I saw that someone was talking about weather, and then I looked and I didn't see anything that looked significant, so I didn't want to ring any false alarm bells, but definitely something to keep in mind. But Chris and Jake will keep you abreast of all of those updates coming up next on the Baseball Live Before Lock. Fast Eddie Fear, Josh Engelman on the NBA Live Before Lock, taking you up till 7 p.m. Eastern time for tonight's 11-game NBA slate. If you like the show, it's greatly appreciated and helpful if you hit us with a thumbs up. You like the video, we appreciate you, and it does a lot for us. Subscribe, hit that notification bell so you always know when content's dropping next. You're always alerted. We wish you the best of luck. Adam and myself will see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive. Peace.